Members, good evening officers, and good evening to members of the public, and to all those listening on our YouTube channel, watching on our YouTube channel. Welcome to this Planning Committee meeting, 30th of July. Apologies, these clocks are slightly on the slow side, so I have actually just going by time on my computer. So we'll move on to the agenda for this evening's meeting. First item of the agenda is apologies for absence. We have two apologies this evening, Councillor Beavis and Councillor Schweer. Councillor Beavis is being substituted by Councillor Wright, and Councillor Schweer is being substituted by Councillor Prime. Move on now to item 2 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Do members wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda? That is a no. Thank you, members. Now move on to item 3 on the agenda, minutes of the previous meeting. I have before me the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 9th of July, which has been circulated to you all. Are you happy that I...
Move, Madam Chairman, as a true reflection.
Thank you. Second. All those in favour that I sign? Thank you, members. The next item is item 4 on the agenda, is public question time. We don't have any registered speakers to speak under this item, so we'll move on now to item 5 on the agenda for planning applications. The first planning application to be considered this evening is item 5A, application number 23/00816 out, land at Cranes Lane, Kelvedon, and that is to be found on page 5 of your agenda. We do have one speaker this evening, as Mrs. Wendy Scott. If you'd like to come to the table here and give your statement, you have 3 minutes to give your statement. Thank you.
Can I stand?
Absolutely, if you prefer.
Thank you. As the owner of the site in question, I would like to share with committee my thoughts on a couple of things regarding this application. We have paid for numerous reports to support the application, but the ones I'd like to mention in particular relate to noise and heritage harm. Issues relating to both have required us to employ greatly respected professionals to submit their findings on both matters, which I'm assuming the members have had the opportunity to study for themselves, but I would like to add to their findings. My husband and I are the previous owners of Crabs Farm and lived there for many years until 2019. We spent a huge amount of money renovating what was a very neglected property. Following interest from the many guests that attended our daughter's wedding, we decided to start a wedding business which became highly successful, hosting 140 weddings per year. When we renovated the barn, we took great care to cover as many eventualities as possible, one of which was noise. We ensured that the barn was insulated between every beam from top to bottom with 75mm Celotex and then plasterboard and plaster. We lived in the farmhouse adjacent to the barn and were able to sit in our living room and watch TV without interference from music being played next door. The music was barely audible from the garden of the house, and we never once had a complaint from nearby residents. Currently, the venue is operating predominantly as a restaurant every Monday to Sunday with an occasional function. There will therefore be no noise impact from the venue on any new houses on the application site. It is also our view that the officer report overstates any harm that might be caused by our proposed development on the setting of the listed buildings. When we left the property, the setting was still very natural with grassed areas everywhere. The setting has now changed considerably. It's become very commercialised with large areas of hard paving, pathways, permanent structures that cover the paved areas with canvas, and this without the caravan site that is being installed in the gardens of the farmhouse with more hard paving for access. The setting of the listed buildings has been severely compromised by these recent changes at the venue itself. The listed buildings are completely screened around the whole rear perimeter from the entrance gates to the car park to the front roadside at the far side of the property by mature trees and native hedging which we planted at minimal intervals to form a screen more than 20 years ago, and because of the trees and high level native hedging, Crabs Farm is not visible from the application site. In his decision letter allowing the appeal on the adjacent site, To ours, the inspector commented that the setting of the buildings at Crabs Farm is largely confined to a small area of land immediately around the farmstead. Our application proposal will have no effect on this setting. I would urge you to visit the site and see this for yourself before making a decision on this application. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs Scott.
Shall I turn it off?
Yes, please. So we'll now move on to the presentation by the officer, Matt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. So the application before you this evening is an outline planning application with all matters reserved apart from access for the erection of around 100 dwellings, which would include 40% affordable housing, associated open space, a rural business court of around 2,500 square metres, which would be use class E. And this is the site lands at Cranes Lane, Kelvedon. So the red line site boundary, as you can see, extends to about 6.3 hectares. Of note, the red hatching down here is the land that National Highways requested that be excluded from the application site because it forms part of the A12 widening DCO. So the order limits, so that essentially the red line of that development consent order, that DCO, includes part of this site, so that is why it's been excluded. As you can see, we've got the A12 to the south, we've got the mainline railway to the north, you've got Crabs Farm and Crabs Barn to the east, and then to the immediately adjacent to the the west, and then immediately adjacent to the east you've got the adjacent site which was allowed on appeal, members may remember, and that came before them a couple of years ago. So I thought I'd just include this aerial plan just to give you a flavour of the site and its current use, which is agricultural or former use. You can see the vegetation is sort of mainly confined to the field boundaries. Around Crabs Farm and Crabs Barn there was also some vegetation and trees, which has been said at public question time. And it also better shows the A12 to the south, any existing configuration. So the application was supported by an indicative master plan. It shows commercial development to the south, while residential would form the remaining parcels, as you can see. The Crabs Farm would be encircled by the residential on two sides, if this was to, if the development was to come forward in this way. But because the plan's not for approval, in theory a different scheme could be put forward at reserved matters stage, so it isn't only indicative. But obviously, as you'll have read in the committee report, we have quite significant heritage, character and amenity concerns with what is currently proposed. And I think just another point worth mentioning is the link that's shown to the adjacent site. At the moment we haven't really seen any evidence which would suggest that would actually come forward. So in all actuality it probably wouldn't come forward if the site was to be approved. But yeah. Okay, so the application was also supported by an indicative block plan. So you can see the sort of the commercial area at the front. One of the things that was submitted during the application process was a noise report, which sought to sort of demonstrate that the site could be attenuated effectively from the noise from the A12 in particular. So that noise report made an assumption that these commercial buildings would be 9 metres high, and then the residential, which is sort of this south side of the spine road that's shown indicatively, these units here would be 3-storey. and then to the north, it's not shown on this plan, but I don't think, but there'd be a bund or a fence to the railway to again help attenuate the site, or that would be necessary at least. And then just a section drawing really. So we'll start with the A12 and London Road. So section X. So section X is this one. So the top part is essentially what it looks like on the ground from a top-down view, and then below it is the actual section. So that's showing the existing A12 over here, obviously at an elevated position, and then slope down towards London Road, then the commercial development which is indicatively proposed, and then the 3-storey residential development. And then if we flick back, so section Y is for the railway, so that is, as you can see down here, 2 options. One is a bund with a smaller fence, or one with a 3.5 metre acoustic fence to block noise from the railway to, as I said, attenuate the site effectively. But I think, yeah, it's important to note again that, you know, while this was put forward to show that the site could be attenuated in principle, none of these parameters were put forward for approval in terms of plan form, so we don't actually have anything technically that we could approve at this time if we were to recommend approval. Yeah, I don't think there's much else to say on this one actually. In terms of the existing configuration for the access, so Cranes Lane is an existing access which is here, which we'll see in the photos. This is a new access into the Royal Business Court, the employment. There is a difference, so as part of the application, National Highways and Essex Highways asked the applicant to put forward 2 plans, one in the future A12 scenario, so that is if the A12 DCO were to go ahead, then that would necessitate some changes. The slip road would move, so if I flick back to the existing alignment, so the slip road from the A12 is this road here, you see my cursor, and then obviously you've got Cranes Lane and then London Road as it goes on, and this is the slip to go on to the A12 under the bridge. And then as part of the works for the A12 DCO, that would change so that you can see the alignment is different. That'd just be more of a sort of standard 30 miles per hour road, I believe. You can see there's some changes here as well where it goes under the bridge. If members have any questions about this, I'm happy to try and answer. So just to quickly flick through some photos. So the existing business units on the opposite side of the road are behind me in this picture. I'm looking west/north, so the existing slip road that I was just talking about from the A12 is just up here, and the site itself is just over here. And then this is from the same spot, just turning 180 degrees, looking down towards the village of Kelvedon, the site here, and then the difference is where the other site, the adjacent site, the appeal site, that's the green, and our site is the brown. So this picture I've sort of moved up towards the slip road, as you can see over here, looking at the existing Cranes Lane access. And in this photo I've walked up Cranes Lane a little way, looking down south towards the A12, which is here, which you can see is an elevated position with the feeder road underneath, and the site's on my left. And again, 180 degrees looking north along Cranes Lane. Site's to my right. Some of this vegetation would need to go to facilitate a change in the access as per the committee report. And then we've got Crabs Farm. There's a couple of photos of Crabs Farm, which is the listed building. And then we've got another photo, so that's looking northeast. So Cranes Lane is behind me, London Road to the right, the adjacent site over here, Crabs Farm sort of over here. And then from the same similar spot, looking back to that sort of the middle of the site, looking back towards the industrial buildings on London Road and towards the A12. And then the next photo is looking north towards the railway, so you can just about see Crabs Farm over here behind the trees, and then looking north to the railway. And then so Crabs Farm and the barn are over here behind, and then you're looking at east, so looking across the sort of the top part of the site, the railway to my left, and the adjacent site, of course, over there. And then this is just from the railway bridge, just looking down the railway, and the site is on the right over here. So just to quickly sort of wrap it all up then, so we've got an outline application with all matters reserved, apart from access for around 100 dwellings and the employment of 2,500 square metres of use class E. So the site is adjacent to Kelvedon, which is a key service village, but it is outside of the defined village envelope or settlement limits. It is a constrained site. The A12 to the south has significant noise implications for future occupiers. The railway to the north has noise implications for future occupiers. And obviously you've got the Grade 2 listed Crabs Farm and Crabs Barn, and the associated heritage impact which the development would cause, and the council's historic buildings consultant has raised an objection. And then obviously in terms of noise, the Environmental Health Officer considers that more information is required from the applicant in terms of noise impacts from the widened A12 schemes of the new A12 scheme, impacts from the wedding venue, and obviously further information, because I don't think anything was put forward about that, and then any overheating from closed windows in terms of like ventilation, to achieve a noise environment, some of the windows might have to be closed for a long period of time. And then, as I've said, there's no, even though there's some indicative plans, nothing's been formally put forward to be approved. And those parameters, if they were to be put forward, such as the 3-storey development, in officer's opinion, that wouldn't be appropriate in an edge of village location, given how close they would be to the road. So officers consider that the applicant hasn't demonstrated how they could satisfactorily accommodate the quantum of development proposed, as well as deliver acceptable amenity to all future residents. And then just a snippet really of the benefits. I won't read through it all. Just to say, really, that ultimately officers have, obviously given this, taken into account the scheme benefits, taken into account the harms, and in our view, the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would outweigh the benefits against the policies in the development plan and as taken as a whole. So before members this evening, there's 4 reasons for refusal: heritage impact on Crabs Farm and Crabs Barn, insufficient information, so that's the future A12 noise environment, the existing wedding venue noise environment, and overheating. And then reason 3 is the character impact from the 3-storey development. And then reason 4 is the lack of section 106, which hasn't been secured at this time. I think that's it from me. Happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Councillor Basflint.
Madam Chairman, before we get any further into the meeting, can we welcome Sarah Ashton, the new Head of Planning, because there will be members around this table who have never met her yet. So I would like to welcome her on behalf of the committee to the meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for pointing out, Councillor Basflint. There's Sarah Ashton here, who's our new Head of planning. Thank you. Who would like to kick this one off? Councillor Diamond.
Good evening. I know this application is far from perfect and there are definite issues. However, I'm struggling to agree that the issues are to such an extent that we would want to turn down 100 new homes, 40 of which would be either affordable or social. I understand there are issues with noise pollution, but I don't think that that these properties are not in keeping. I would say that that's often a very subjective point of view, and I get that there's no way of making that objective, but I still don't think the issues are of such greatness that they are not that the positives of the application outweigh the negatives. My one real issue is that the 106 has not funding has not been is not yet in place. Would there be a way, and this is a genuine question, I don't know if this is possible, that we could approve the application, but only on the, only if a 106 funding was given? Would that be? Would we have to put an addendum to it, or is that not something we could do? Sorry if I haven't made myself clear.
Thank you, Councillor Diamond. So if members were minded to recommend approval for the application this evening, then it would be a resolution to grant. That would then give officers time to negotiate the Section 106 before issuing a decision.
If we were able to do that, then I would be voting in favour.
Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, the reason it's for refusal on policy grounds is because we have an adopted local plan, we have a 5-year housing supply, we have a good delivery record, and this site is not allocated in the local plan, it's in the countryside. Those are the policy reasons. And if we just take the view that, well, there's not too much wrong with it, we're just going to keep granting sites, well, given the pressure on this area, it wouldn't be many decades before, particularly in the south of the district, we wouldn't have any countryside left, full stop. And I think in terms of Kelvedon and Fearing, we've got to remember that something like cumulatively not far short of 2,000 houses are already either being built or are being built or are just coming up to being built. There's a very substantial amount of housing being built in the Kelvedon and Fearing area, and that's before we start on Rivenhall, Silver and Cressing and all the other villages which have got thousands of houses. So I think that is one of the strong policy grounds why we shouldn't approve it. I know it's not, the officers are not saying that there's a distinct policy issue about distance from amenities, but I think it is worth saying that this is right on the edge of the village. Well, it's really on the land that locally we consider to be the gap between Rivenhall End and Kelvedon, and that yes, it is theoretically walkable, but I think that would apply to the people who feel able to do that. I think a lot of people wouldn't walk it, they'd drive, particularly given where the access is onto Cranes Lane. So that inevitably means even if a proportion of people drive, that's going to increase traffic along London Road into the village. We've also got the context that 300 houses are on the site on London Road, Granton on Appeal, right next to this development. So you've got cumulative impacts. I think we've got very clear reasons for refusal on the impacts on the heritage assets at the adjacent farm. It's contrary to the Kelvedon neighbourhood plan, and we've got a parish council objection. I think the issue of noise is very significant. The train noise obviously is spasmodic, it comes and goes through the day, but anyone who lives near the A12 or even within earshot of it, particularly at night actually, is aware of just how constant the noise from the A12 is. It never really stops, not even in the middle of the night. And as we have a very detailed reports from the environmental health officer, she's not at all clear how this is going to be mitigated. There's talk about having to have shut windows, mechanical ventilation, whether buildings in between the housing and the commercial buildings in between the housing and the A12 could mitigate it. But I think overall we just don't know, and we know that people are going who live particularly at that end, the A12 end, are going to be subjected to noise. And then the final issue I'm going to bring up, and then we've got tree losses as well onto the access road. Again, it's not a reason that I'm putting forward why we should reject this, and I know officers in the report are very clear that it's not a reason we could bring forward. But local people know that the traffic as it comes off the A12 comes down that slope very fast into Kelvedon. It's been an issue for locally in Kelvedon for a very long time. Cranes Lane is obviously legitimate access that's already there, but the issue is you're going to have a lot more traffic from this development coming out onto where the traffic's coming down off the A12 slip road. So although it's not a reason for refusal, I'd have concerns about adding traffic into that location. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Bowes-Flint.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Like Councillor Abbott, this is against policy, and I'm not going to repeat all of what he said, but I totally agree. But I will repeat what I said at the last meeting. Whilst I understand why Councillor Diamond is saying what he's saying, we cannot completely destroy and lose all of the countryside just for the sake of affordable housing. We love affordable housing. Our affordable housing, as you well know, is the best in the county at the moment, but it doesn't, with getting that figure, we've not destroyed the countryside on our decisions. So therefore, I cannot support this application, Madam Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, I too am in agreement with what the previous two councillors have said. There would be no point in us having policies to guide us in making decisions if we were only to come to the planning committee to disregard the work of planning officers just because we don't like what's in the policy. I think secondly, just alluding to the noise issues, one can't quite imagine living in a house if they were built out on a day like today and having to choose whether or not to live with noise or to live with unbearable heat, because I think the toss-up between the two could be quite detrimental to not just your physical health but also your mental health as well. And again, just to the point around what Councillor Diamond had mentioned, we do try and do as much affordable housing as we can. We have a great record of affordable housing delivery in this district, as mentioned by Councillor Bowes-Flint on a number of occasions. This is in the wrong place. It's supported by policy and it's supported with 4 good reasons for refusal this evening, and I will be following officers' recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree strongly with all I've heard, and I feel that Councillor Abbott has covered off the vast majority of concerns that I have on reading the papers. But I think there's something over and above all of that which is really important, and this council cares passionately about the quality of homing and the sort of life people can lead in the homes that we consent to be built here. And I would agree with Councillor Ritchie's comment, but it's not about a day like today with a house that has to be shut up because you couldn't live with the outside bursting in on you in terms of noise. And so when I look at this proposal, I think to myself, if this goes ahead, in 20 years' time, we're going to be looking at something we lament, and so will the people who live there, because it won't be a pleasant place to live. And this is a very big district, and there is a lot of land here, and there are better places to deliver affordable housing and what have you, in places where people will have a much better quality of life, and where the homes that we've consented and they live in support well-being and all those other benefits which we are very careful to support here in Braintree District. And so I too have no problem in agreeing with the officers and their recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Just have a question myself actually for Matt. I think one of the major issues here is the issues around noise. What would you sort of documents and evidence would you expect to see on an outline application where there is a potential issue with noise?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I think it would site by site be dependent. I think on this scheme, they've they put forward a noise report. The noise report, I think there was 3 iterations. The third iteration went further than the previous 2 in that it submitted likely parameters like those story heights that I was talking about to try and secure the noise environment. But what we really needed is something more concrete in terms of the plans and actually locking in those parameters. At the moment it's just theoretical. There's as I say, there's nothing that is put forward for approval as such. And then obviously there is other points there are other factors here, like the widening of the A12. There's not really been any consideration in the noise report about what impacts that could have, because obviously if that does come forward, that could change the noise environment. And similarly with the wedding venue as well. So yeah, I think it's just basically further information, further certainty that we need. Does that answer your question?
And yeah, that's very helpful. I just wanted to, particularly concerned, I think, about the lack of a parameter plan fixing all these things. Chris, I think you wanted to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a separate point. I just wanted to pick up on a point that Councillor Abbott just raised around the relationship to services and facilities. So not diminishing the point at all. And I just wanted, I suppose, just to clarify, is something ordinarily we would consider and look quite closely at in terms of a development's relationship to services and facilities, and along with the size of the settlement as well. It's just to highlight, and reference was made by Councillor Abbott to the adjacent site. As part of that scheme that was consented, there will be some facilities that will be on that site which provides for health centre, school site and a retail centre as well. There is a care home. So that is one of the reasons I think why we're mindful of the adjacency of that, but not diminishing the point in terms of its relationship to the centre of the village. But I just wanted to highlight that I think that was in our thought process in terms of the recommendation as to why that's not featuring in terms of the site's relationship to the centre of the village, because I know that was a particular issue on the adjacent site. So I just wanted to make that point clear. Hopefully that's helpful, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, members. I think it doesn't look like anybody else wished to speak on this application. Would anybody like to move the officer's recommendation to refuse permission? Councillor Holland, and does that find a seconder? Councillor Ritchie. So all those in favour of refusing this application? Those against? Those in support? Sorry, those against refusing it, that's a double negative, but abstentions? Councillor Lamb, thank you. Thank you, members. The application has been refused. So I'll now move on to our second application this evening, which is item 5B on your agenda, page 73 of the agenda. This is application number 23/02321 out, land adjacent to Coney's Farm, Oak Road, Housestead. We do have one speaker on this application, is Mr. Mark Sweeting. If you'd like to come to the table, please, Mr. Sweeting. You've got 3 minutes, as usual.
I can sit down, I see. Views I expressed this evening really are also the views that are shared by my immediate neighbour, Mrs. Bishop, who has asked if I would speak on her behalf, and she's the lady who's sitting with me this evening. My name is Mark Sweeting, and my wife and I reside at Coney's Cottage, Oak Road, and our property is situated adjacent to this proposed development. We both wish to again strongly object to this further proposal. Our emails dated the 19th of May 21 and the 12th of October 23 set out very specific reasons as to why this development should be refused. And we've assumed that these emails have already been made available to members for this meeting. In addition to those objections, it would appear that approximately 150 trees will need to be destroyed to accommodate 39 houses/flats. Surely this decision would not be acceptable in terms of the current concerns relating to the climate environmental issues. The area site gets very waterlogged, so removing the trees would only exacerbate this problem. The committee will be aware that one of the reasons for refusing the development of the 20 houses north of the junction of Russell Road and the A131 was concerns regarding the extraction of trees to accommodate the scheme. When this original application was submitted, both Halstead and Braintree Council unanimously rejected the application, and we would therefore hope that this second scheme or alternative scheme again be refused for all the reasons we have previously given, as well as the ones I've given tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeting and Mrs. Bishop. So we'll now move on to presentation, which is going to be given by Sam. When you're ready, Sam.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, members. As has been mentioned, I'm here today to present an application seeking outline planning permission with all matters reserved for 39 residential dwellings at a site known as land adjacent Coney's Farm at Oak Road, Halstead at Essex. So this is the location plan. It shows the application site outlined in red. The site is outside of, but located adjacent to, the settlement boundary of Halstead. Oak Road runs along the west of the site, so down here, if you can see my cursor, takes a sharp bend and then runs along the south towards Tidings Hill, which is sort of off screen over here. New development has been built toward the west of the site, and you can see Richardson Lane, which is just sort of off plan just up here, and Coney's Road to the north of the site, which is an established estate. Coney's Water Tower is to the northwest of the site, so that's up here. To the east, the green space is currently being developed by Bellway, and that's this site here. I'll speak about that in a second. This section of Oak Road is particularly rural and contrasts with the otherwise urban character of Halstead. As Mr. Sweeting during public question time mentioned, some members may recall this site. We had a previous application here which was heard in 2022 at Planning Committee. So this plan shows the application site outlined in red. I apologise that the layers have shifted slightly there, but if you sort of move them down a little bit. So the application site is outlined in red, and abutting the site is the Bellway site, which is outlined in green, and the town of Halstead is focused north. This is an indicative site plan, so the application seeks outline planning permission of all matters reserved. However, the number of dwellings will become approved. Therefore, the council needs to be satisfied that this amount of development can be accommodated in a satisfactory manner. The indicative plans show how the applicants consider this development could be achieved. You can see a block of flats abutting the access, which is up here, which would accommodate 10 residential units, a row of detached dwellings across the northern boundary, semi-detached dwellings running down the west boundary, and 2 detached dwellings to the southeast. The dwellings would be between 2 and 4 bedroom, and a suds feature would also be situated to the southeast corner, which is down here. I'll just move that off screen. Officers consider that there are issues with the layout indicated. 10 units would be provided in a block of flats. However, this building would abut the highway and appear incongruous and prominent in this type of street scene. The dwellings along the west and east boundaries are plots 18 to 29, so that's these all the way down here, and then these ones up here, would have between 10 and 13 metres of distance between their rear elevations to the existing boundaries of neighbouring dwellings, which is less than the Essex Design Guide's requirement for no less than 15 metres. Providing these dwellings in this arrangement would result, officers consider, in harm to neighbouring residential amenities. Therefore, whilst this plan is indicative, it is the evidence provided to demonstrate the site can accommodate the 39 dwellings sought, and for these reasons, officers do not consider that it does this successfully, and therefore it's considered that the plan failed to demonstrate that the site is capable of accommodating this scale of development proposed. Onto the arboricultural plan. So this plan shows the spread of trees and hedges across the site. Whilst the root protection area of the TPO tree to the east of the site, so that's this one up here, officers considered wouldn't be adversely effective. The teal colour, so you can see these sort of outline in teal, indicates trees and hedges which would be removed to accommodate the development indicative shown. The access to the site, which is up here, shown to the northwest, indicates the removal of several trees and hedges. This is not only to physically provide the access, but also the visibility displays. 2 trees are also indicated to the garden spaces of 2 plots at the northeast corner of the site, so that's these 2 here. Providing the gardens here would inhibit the quality of amenity for the future occupiers and also place pressure for the removal of the trees in the long term. Whilst the plan is indicative, it does not demonstrate, again, that the site can accommodate the scale of development proposed in an acceptable manner. Onto the access plan. Again, this is indicative as access is a reserved matter. However, it's not evident from the proposals whether the access can be provided elsewhere. The plan shows the creation of a new access together with visibility displays which are indicated in pink. I think you can make that out on the screen, which would require the loss of existing trees and hedges, and you can see these are indicated to be removed. So onto some photos. So for those that know, Oak Road is sort of split into 2 distinct character areas. You've got this sort of section of Oak Road. It's quite urban. The speed limit you can see is 30 miles an hour. There's built form to the right of the photo, which dates to around the 70s or 80s. A more recent built form to the left, which has been developed in the last couple of years. The road is quite wide, with 2 cars able to pass side by side. There's street lighting, and the street scene feels quite wide open and spacious. But if you turn around, you can see the speed limit changes to national speed limit. The character of the street scene changes. The road becomes single track and is bound on either side by thick vegetation. The street lighting ends, as does the paved walkway. If we carry on going down there, the trend continues, and even though we've gone maybe 20 or 30 metres, you can see we could almost be in the middle of the countryside. Tall trees, thick hedges to either side. The road gets increasingly more narrow toward the 90-degree bend in the road, which you can't quite see from this photo. You can see though the entrances to Coney's Farm and Coney's Cottage, which is sort of up here. So this photo shows the indicated location of the proposed access. The access would require the loss of substantial amounts of hedges and trees to the right-hand side of the photo. The loss of this amount of vegetation would see notable and irreversible changes to the street scene. And then if we carry on going down Oak Road towards the south of the site, so if you carried on going that way, you'd end up towards Tidings Hill. We're sort of past the 90-degree bend now. The road becomes even more narrow. The surface becomes a little bit more questionable in terms of its quality, with chipped road edges, vegetation either side spreading into the road. And then within the site, you can see, so this tree here is the TPO tree. It's located outside of the site. But it is the tree that's subject to that preservation order. This photo is looking towards the northern boundary of the site. You can see the site is well enclosed with trees and hedges forming a thick boundary line. Looking across the site, existing trees and hedges are evident and give the space a green and rural feel. And then you can see on this photo Coney's Water Tower, which is just back here, and then the houses on Coney's Road, which is just back here. Just to sort of summarise then, the proposal, as I mentioned, is for an outline planning permission of all matters reserved to 39 residential dwellings. The site is outside of but adjacent to the assessment boundary for the town of Halstead. The technical objections which were raised in the previous application have now been overcome, but the site is set on a rural street scene consisting of a narrow single track with no street lighting, no footpath and high trees and hedges to either side. The scale of development which is indicated would require a block of flats, would not be in keeping with the rural street scene, and also would require the loss of existing Category A and Category B trees and hedges that make a significant positive contribution to the rural character of the site. There are existing dwellings to the east and west boundaries of the site which will share rear boundaries of the new dwellings, and the plans, although indicative, do not demonstrate that the dwellings can be provided without resulting in impacts to neighbouring residential amenities, and also without providing a poor quality amenity for future occupiers. And overall, officers consider that the applicant hasn't demonstrated that the site can accommodate the scale of development proposed. So when we consider the planning balance, there will be benefits, and these will be the delivery of 39 new dwellings, including 28 market houses and 11 affordable houses. The site is adjacent to the town of Halstead, and there would be economic and social benefits arising through the development. There would also be harms. The site located outside of the assessment boundary for Halstead, which is contrary to policy LPP1 of the adopted local plan. It would require the loss of many Category A and Category B trees and hedges that make a significant positive contribution to the rural character of the site. the plans don't demonstrate that the dwellings can be provided without resulting in impacts on neighbouring residential amenities, and also without providing a poor quality amenity for future occupiers. The council can demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, and when we apply that planning balance, officers consider that the adverse impacts of granting permission would outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies and development plan taken as a whole. And therefore, officers' recommendation is to refuse. I won't read out that reason for refusal. There's 2 reasons on the screen there. Hopefully, if any members have any questions, I'll be happy to help.
Thank you, Sam. Members, would like to start? Sorry, Councillor Finken.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, I support the officer's recommendation. I think it's a very cramped development, far too many houses for the site. The 3-storey block of flats is totally unsuitable for the location. It's an urbanisation of a rural area, as the officer has said, involving the destruction of many trees and hedges. And I think the highways implications haven't been emphasised enough, really. It's going to be increasing the problems of traffic in the area in narrow, unsuitable roads. Already we've had several developments there which have added to the problems in that area, and this would just be exacerbating those problems. So for all those reasons, I will be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor, I'm going to go for Councillor Monday first then.
Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for a good presentation, Sam. And I agree with Councillor Finken wholeheartedly. Oak Road is also up, there's an application for it being a quiet road, and this certainly wouldn't fall under that purview if we had 39 houses on here. I would like to ask one thing. On your summary of key considerations, it says that technical objections raised in previous applications now overcome. Just wondered if you could clarify what those technical application or technical reasons were.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I'll be happy to help with that. So one of the reasons for refusal of the previous application was to do with SUDs. And in this application, we have received more information in relation to SUDs. We've worked with the applicants to try and overcome that, and the lead local flood authority have come back with no objections to this application. So that previous reason for refusal has now been overcome.
Councillor Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, we have 2 reasons for refusals. If I take them in reverse order, we don't currently have a Section 106 agreement approved or in place. As with the previous application, I mean, you could set that aside and say that if this was approved tonight, then it gives officers time to negotiate a Section 106, although it's not ideal when these come forward without one being agreed. But the first reason, and I think the main reason for refusal, recommended refusal, and I agree with what colleagues have said, is around where the site is. As Sam said, at Oak Road, when you start off on Oak Road, it is a wide road and it's got street lighting and footpaths, but very quickly, the closer you get to where the proposed site is, it's not much more than a country lane. It really isn't suitable. And I actually agree with what Councillor Finken said, that around the highways point and the access, because of the very rural nature of the road. And there's the also major issue of, I agree with officers, that it doesn't seem to me that the number of dwellings can be accommodated comfortably on the site without compromising the amenity space. So all in all, I don't think it's satisfactory. It isn't an approved site in our local plan, so I would also support recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yes, just very briefly, whilst agreeing with everything that's already been said and not repeating it, I'm very concerned about the loss of the trees and hedges. Clearly they're substantial and totally inappropriate access onto what is a narrow lane. But I think also because of the nature of they're trying to do too much on the site, the trees that would survive, I always get nervous when you see a plan and there's a canopy of a tree drawn a couple of feet away from a building. They will come under pressure to be cut or felled, inevitably. So I think that's another sort of consequence of the fact it's a cramped site. Thank you.
Before I come to you, Councillor Holland, just on that point, would you, Matt, on the photographs, is there a photograph of the trees that would be removed to create the access?
So this is the location of the access. So it's not the best photo. I apologise. It is quite a narrow lane. It's quite sort of difficult to stand in the right place. But it would be this sort of area of trees, and that'll be required. And also, obviously, you've got those visibility displays. So there'll actually be more behind where I'm standing as well. And if I go back, there'll be some of these along here as well.
Okay, that's helpful to point that out, because obviously see it on the plan, but it's helpful to see the photographs as well. Thank you. Councillor Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having, along with Madam Chair, walked around this part of Halstead in recent weeks, along with some other members, one of the things that really surprises me about this coming forward at all is that I'm looking at a country lane with no appreciable verge, no stepping off ground. It's completely inappropriate, in my belief, for anybody on foot or accessing that site or from the footpath that's already there, that's been built as part, I presume, of the existing new development. And so it just seems to me that it's actually pretty unsafe, and I can't imagine that enough Section 106 money would be got out of a site of this size to actually fund remediating those particular issues, and that's without considering the issues that I support that Councillor Abbott's raised around the loss of trees and a large chunk of a mature mixed hedgerow. So on that basis alone, it seems not to be a sensible site because the access is so compromised. The other thing is, without wishing to sound like a crack record, is the quality of homes we would be looking to deliver, because it seems to me that the main run of housing that's proposed here, in actual fact, is going to compromise the existing houses on the existing development and lead to compromised amenity space, which is a fundamental part of delivering homes that support the well-being of our residents. And so for these reasons, as well as all of the other ones I've heard this evening, I'm fully supportive of Office's recommendation and will be voting accordingly. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Any other members? Oh, would anybody like to move officer recommendation to refuse this application? Councillor Finken and a seconder? Councillor Monday. All those in favour of refusal? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. So that brings us to the end of our meeting this evening, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.